Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. We begin tonight with the growing tension between Canada and the U.S. as new comments from the American president raise more eyebrows on our side of the border. Chris Ensing reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump made another threat this week of tariffs, this time specifically targeting the vehicles made in Canada, like the ones at the Windsor assembly plant. These vehicles and jobs continue to be a focal point of Trump's threats. A new one made during a Fox News interview on Monday, 8 days into the negotiated pause of sweeping 25% tariffs on Canadian imports.
If we don't make a deal with Canada, we're going to put a big tariff on cars, could be a 50 or 100%, because we don't want their cars. We want to make the cars in Detroit.
Canada builds 1.3 million vehicles a year, 88% exported to the United States, less than 10% of what they buy. A 25% tariff would make the cost of a Canadian-made vehicle jump by more than $6,000 on the American side.
Chrysler Pacifica 2025.
Built right across the way?
Built right across the street.
On the Canadian side of the border, this dealership is feeling the unrelenting uncertainty of the pandemic, microchip shortage, and now tariffs.
It's been a tough go. We've seen our ups and downs, but as far as tariffs, we really don't know what that impact's going to be at this point.
It's not a potential sticker shock affecting sales. Some buyers are pausing purchases because of potential job losses.
Correct, yeah, and that's always been a concern in Windsor. We have a heavy, tool and mold. We have, again, the plants across the street. So a lot of Windsor depends on those jobs, and I think that becomes the more important thing, and it's been great for them the last year, but where does that take this if, they're trying to get jobs over to the U.S.?
Trump says he wants those jobs in Detroit.
Canada has a very big car industry. They stole it from us. They stole it because our people were asleep at the wheel.
Trump's attack on Canada's sovereignty requires action, says the head of Unifor's Independent Parts Supplier Council.
Out of chaos, always opportunity. The damage Donald Trump has done in relationship between the American and the Canadian, they alert us that we have to be resilient. We need an industrial, comprehensive policy started from the natural resources up to manufacturing. He says tariffs will lead to plant shutdowns on both sides of the border and warns it's bad business for everyone's bottom line. It doesn't benefit the American average individual, the consumer, nor the Canadian. It's just going to make everything is expensive for everybody. Chris Ensing, CBC News, Windsor.
Some Trump tariffs that are a done deal, those on aluminum and steel. They are weighing heavily on producers here at home. CBC's Nisha Patel shows us both industries are already feeling the impact.
Hamilton, Ontario is known as Steel Town. For workers here, tariffs are a real concern.
It's going to hurt the steel industry.
It'll be bad for everybody.
So, you have to take it as it comes.
Just the threat of a 25% tax has already been weighing on steel producers for weeks, not to mention the industry's tens of thousands of employees.
Sales are slow. The order books are low. They've actually put a hiring on freeze on hiring.
Now tariffs could take effect in less than a month. Without an exemption for Canada, businesses could be devastated.
Many key sectors of the economy that rely on steel. It has an infrastructure and a defense application. So you really want your domestic industry protected.
It's a familiar fight. When Donald Trump imposed 25% tariffs on steel in 2018, Canadian exports sank almost immediately. The trade war ended a year later after huge disruptions to businesses on both sides of the border.
We've got a big problem in Canada. We've got to find another way to fuel our economic growth rather than relying on exports to this very, very unreliable trade partner.
In the Ontario border town of Windsor, across the river from Detroit, Ryan Jordan's company transforms steel into parts like railings. He weathered the tariff storm back in 2018.
It was difficult for us. We had to diversify. We're not sure how this is going to play out at this time.
What frightens him most, he says, is the possibility of even higher tariffs.
In a month, now it's 40%, and then a month later it's 50%, I don't know how anyone can survive even quoting a project for the future.
It seems anyone in business these days needs to have nerves of steel. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
PC leader Doug Ford has taken his Ontario election campaign tour south of the border. Ford is in Washington for the first of 2 days, trying to take an anti-tariff message to a U.S. audience. CBC's Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley is also in Washington covering Ford's trip.
Thank you so much for being here.
Doug Ford takes the stage at what's billed as a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
I just want to tell you, I love the U.S. I love the American people.
Turns out Ford's audience in this Washington hotel is largely Canadian. Finding an actual American business person in the crowd proves hard.
I'm Josh Morgan. I'm the mayor of the City of London.
I'm a co-president of AGS Automotive, one of the oldest auto parts companies in Canada.
Still, Ford makes his plea against tariffs.
Let's stick together and please get the message to President Trump. This is not a good idea for both countries. Thank you, and God bless you.
What's not clear is whether anyone here has the power to get that message to Donald Trump, and if they did, whether it would make any difference.
I give the Premier huge credit for coming to try to fight the good fight, but I'm not sure much can change Donald Trump's mind at this point.
Eric Miller is American. He runs a cross-border trade consultancy here in Washington. What he thinks it will take to stop Trump?
Unfortunately, I think you're going to have to see pain. It's when you start seeing stock markets go down, when you start seeing vehicle plants close, when you start seeing the price of beef go up, when you start seeing the price of energy go up. That is what will get through to President Trump.
The PC party paid for Ford, his candidates, and his staff to make this trip. The provincial government covered the cost of today's event, including giving out copies of this glossy brochure pitching what Ford calls Fortress AmCan. Meanwhile, back in Ontario, Ford's rivals slam his trip.
He's not there in Washington to protect our jobs, because the only job he wants to protect is his own.
In doing this in the middle of an election, people see his calling of the election as a very cynical move at a time when we needed to be not distracted.
That report from CBC's Mike Crawley. And now we have Colette Kennedy for a first look at weather as we are bracing for some tough weather conditions. Colette.
Boy, oh boy, Katerina, are we ever? Yes, we have got quite the storm system that's going to be moving in and having an impact tomorrow and tomorrow night. And would you believe it? There's another one in the queue after that for the weekend. But let's just deal with what we have coming. A special weather statement is in place for all of southwestern Ontario. But just a little bit further to the east, we're talking about snowfall warnings and winter storm warnings that are in place. Tonight, quiet before the storm, -8. That snow moves in tomorrow, mid to later afternoon. -2 will be not necessarily the high, but the afternoon temperature. I'm going to go over those accumulations when I come back, Katerina.
Okay, we'll talk in a sec. Thanks, Colette.
Sounds.
We are learning new details now about a Windsor man who died shortly after leaving police custody. A few months ago, Colin Gray was detained by Windsor police for several hours and charged with drunk driving. Minutes after his release, he collapsed outside the station. His family says there was no alcohol in his blood, according to the Ontario Coroner's Office. They've been calling for an inquest into his death. And it all goes back to November 29th. Gray had been driving back into Canada on the Ambassador Bridge. CBSA officers thought the 63-year-old was drunk after driving cautiously and having issues walking after exiting the vehicle. But the family has said that those were symptoms related to his type 2 diabetes. Eventually, Gray spent more than 5 hours in police custody and, according to the family's lawyer, was not offered medical attention. The family spoke today at an emotional news conference.
And I don't have my best friend anymore to call. He called me at least 7 times in a day asking me how am I doing. And I don't have that anymore.
My brother didn't drink. My brother was not a drunk. My brother told these people I'm a diabetic. The minute he said those words, they should have called medical. They are not qualified to judge his medical condition. They're not qualified for that. So you know, they denied him a basic right.
Frankly, we don't know if the policies are deficient or if the policies weren't followed. The only way, the best way to get to the bottom of all of these questions and make sure this never happens to another family is to have a coroner's inquest.
It's not easy because every day I'm trying to move on and try to do back in my routine, but it's not easy. It's not easy at all. I'm sorry.
It's hard not to hate. I want to hate these people. But at the same time, I want to see that this never happens to anybody else again. I want to see that not your brother, not your sister, not your mother are in police custody where they should be safe and end up dead.
Gray died shortly after being let out of police custody. A CBSA spokesperson previously told CBC News that officers followed all internal protocols, including asking individuals if they have any medical conditions. A Windsor police spokesperson previously could not say if officers knew of Gray's medical condition, if he was provided medical care, or offered anything to eat or drink while in custody. The coroner's office has not yet decided if it will grant an inquest. Up next now, if someone is in the middle of a mental health crisis in our city, emergency responders now have a place to take you any day, anytime. CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa reports.
A 24/7 urgent care center specifically for people in a mental health or addictions crisis. That's the goal for this downtown center. Run by Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare and the Canadian Mental Health Association, the center has been around since the COVID-19 pandemic. From 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week, people have been able to walk in if they need help. Here's what's changing. Police and emergency services now have a place to bring someone at any hour who might be in crisis. There will also be 4 beds that someone can stay in for up to 48 hours.
A place like this is a starting point. We need to ensure that there's more available after they leave here. And it's nice to be able to go to 24/7 because we're not locking the door at 8 o'clock at night saying, sorry, we'll see you tomorrow. It's what more can we do for you while you're here?
Windsor Police and Essex Windsor EMS say this is a big step forward. It will allow them to quickly get people the help they need and have first responders get back out in the community.
The idea is really that being able to bring somebody who has agreed in a moment of clarity to say, I would like to enter withdrawal management or I'd like some certain services, to have the ability to transport that person to this center here and they immediately start to receive care. I would say from a statistical point of view will help us.
But most importantly, healthcare providers say it will help people who need it most.
Certainly our internal data, along with our intersecting social and health issues, such as drug poisoning, homelessness, criminalization, and most recently, economic instability, all contribute to further deterioration of Windsorites and Ontarians' mental health. Indeed, this highlights the need for well-established and fully resourced crisis services.
According to providers, this expansion is being funded through a reallocated government grant. The hospital says it's also working on increasing walk-in hours to around the clock, but it's not sure when that service will begin. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
Google says it has changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America for U.S. users accessing Google Maps. The company made the change after Donald Trump signed a proclamation on Sunday. It was one of the multiple executive orders from the U.S. president since taking office. For 4 centuries, the site has been referred to as Gulf of Mexico, and in Mexico, users will still see that original name. But for the rest of the world, Google Maps will show both names. Do you have a story that you think we should cover? We want to hear from you. Send us your ideas. You can reach us by text message at 519-984-2051. And you can also email us at windsor@cbc.ca. We always like to hear from you. And a live look outside there, a milder day today, but tougher conditions ahead. As Colette mentioned, a storm is coming through. She will bring us back up to speed later in the program. We'll have her back on the show. And also, when we come back after the break, a meeting between the Prime Minister and the Vice President of the United States. Stay with us. Welcome back. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had a warning for U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance during a meeting in Paris. He said tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum will hurt both countries, but they'll also hurt the U.S. state that is near and dear to Vance's heart. Ashley Burke has more.
At a summit in Paris, the Prime Minister pushing back against Donald Trump's latest threat.
Tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum would be entirely unjustified. We are the U.S.'s closest ally. Our economies are integrated.
A message he took directly to U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. The event's cameras only briefly caught their exchange in this crowd of world leaders away from the media. Trudeau's photographer close enough to take photos. A Canadian official says the Prime Minister mentioned to Vance the impact of tariffs in his home state, Ohio. Trudeau's publicly warned that a trade war will only drive up American costs. In the U.S., Ohio is the biggest exporter of goods to Canada, and it's where Trump's promising to revive American steelmaking jobs.
We will be working with the American administration over the coming weeks to highlight the negative impacts on Americans and Canadians of these unacceptable tariffs. And if it comes to that, our response, of course, will be firm and clear.
But Trudeau isn't revealing details.
We reciprocate dollar for dollar with tariffs on aluminum and steel.
As usual, we hope that it will not come to that.
Vance also isn't saying if Canada could get an exemption.
Why are you slapping tariffs on steel and aluminum? Why are you slapping tariffs?
The Trump administration believes that
this AI summit, his first international trip to represent Trump's next era of America First on the world stage.
The United States of America is the leader in AI, and our administration plans to keep it that way.
Trudeau says he's speaking to other countries to coordinate a response. The Prime Minister will leave Paris to head to Brussels on Wednesday to sit down with European Union leaders who are also bracing for tariffs to hit them too. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Paris.
Jordan's King Abdullah is calling for a two-state solution in the Middle East, pushing against President Donald Trump's plan for the U.S. to take over and redevelop Gaza. His statement came after a meeting at the White House. CBC's Sasha Petrusik has the details.
It's not a complex thing to do. And with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you're going to have stability in the Middle East for the first time.
U.S. President Donald Trump repeated the proposal that he has put forward to have the U.S. take over Gaza, not to buy it, not to conquer it, but just to simply take it over and to develop it with hotels and office towers and houses. And what would happen to the Palestinians who live there? Well, they would be moved to, as he put it, parcels of land in Jordan and Egypt and anywhere else where somebody wants to set up a home for them, and they would not be allowed to return. He said much of this while he was sitting next to King Abdullah, the leader of Jordan, who is in a bit of an uncomfortable position because Jordan does not want to take in millions of Palestinians. They made that clear. Egypt has said that too, and so have other Arab countries. But Trump is putting the pressure on because both of these countries, Jordan and Egypt especially, rely on U.S. help to the tune of more than $1.5 billion a year. Trump is saying, though, that this is going to happen, and in his words, will create peace in the Middle East.
All the stories you hear about the Middle East not really wanting peace, that they want war, they want this, they want to go a certain place. Let me tell you, those stories are false. They want to have peace.
Jordan's king didn't really have much of an answer to all of this. He suggested that Arab countries, and Egypt in particular, will come back with some kind of a proposal. And as far as Jordan's concerned, he said that it has to take care of its own interests.
Mr. President, I truly believe that with all the challenges that we have in the Middle East, that I finally see somebody that can take us across the finish line to bring stability, peace, and prosperity to all of us in the region.
So a lot of questions being asked, and much of it originating from the White House. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
We'll have Colin Kennedy back with us right after the break to talk us through the storm that is coming. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy is back with us for more on weather. And Colette, right now there's a special weather statement in effect, but that could get upgraded soon, right?
Yeah, there is that possibility there, Katerina, when I'm looking at all the data and what it seems like will be happening with the tracking of this system for tomorrow. So yes, I'm going with what Environment Canada has for us right now. Special weather statement, this entire area, including southwestern Ontario, not that far away, and including parts of Toronto and the Greater Toronto area have recently been upgraded to a snowfall warning. So all these areas in white, snowfall warning, it's 20 to 35 centimeters, or 15 if we take the GTA, up to 30 to 35 centimeters, and with blowing snow too, winter storm warnings into eastern Ontario. I'm thinking the freeze line, so where there's going to be more mixing and where it's going to be more snow, is going to be so close to Windsor and Detroit in here that we could actually be falling on the colder side where our accumulations go higher. So we could see a snowfall warning coming into play here. I just want you to be aware, and I'm going to show you how close it is in just a second here. But dealing with our current temperatures right now, we are certainly in the cold sector, as the system is only, there's a strong system to the south of us. That's not the one we'll be dealing with. This next one's coming through the pipeline and getting to us tomorrow afternoon. There's our wind chill. We will have the winds east, but then they're going to be very strong on the backside of the system into Thursday. A few flurries here and there tonight, otherwise quiet conditions, and even some time tomorrow morning to do any kind of prep work you might want to do, putting down some sand, hopefully it's pet friendly, or salt if you're using those kinds of things. But just stopping this at 3 p.m., coming in as snow, there's that freeze line where it's freezing rain or a mix and rain, and that seems to be shifting a little further south, which again puts this area and up towards Sarnia into the heavier snow segment. But Chatham-Kent maybe, or even Leamington, it could be that close where it's lesser amounts of 5 to 15 centimeters, but it's more than 15 elsewhere. So let me just kind of show you that potential here and just what I'm saying. See that turquoisey blue? That's 5 to 10 centimeters, but just a little further north, including Windsor, we're talking getting into that over 10, potentially pushing over 15 centimeters of snowfall through the area. So yes, the temperature will rise, and there could be some mixing, certainly on the backside. But I am thinking you're going to be doing some shoveling, at least in here. And I know that road conditions tomorrow, starting in the late afternoon, overnight into Thursday, early morning anyway, are going to be treacherous.
Okay, thank you so much, Colette. Thank you for prepping us all, and thanks to you all for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Good night.